Hey there, my name's Brashler, and in this video, I want to teach you how to set up your X32 as a stage box for your Behringer wing. Now, this is going to be perfect for a lot of you who are upgrading from an X32 to a Behringer wing. Now, if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with your production gear, no matter where you're starting from. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, like I was saying, this is going to be a perfect thing for those of you who had an X32 and are upgrading to a Behringer wing. Now, the great thing is you can end up using your X32 as a stage box, or even better, you can use it as a stage box and a monitor console if you had a couple in-ears that you needed to be running off of that, and maybe a dedicated engineer for that Behringer X32. And then you can focus on using the Wing Compact, Wing Rack, or Wing Full Size as your front-of-house console. Now, when you are connecting the X32 and the wing together, you do need to use a shielded Cat5e cable, and it can be up to 80 meters in length. Now, it does need to be shielded, and it is recommended to have the Ethercon connector with the shield grounded to both the RJ45 of the cable and the shield of the actual Ethercon connector. So make sure that that is set. If you're using Cat6 or something else, then your distance might be limited by that cable. But I have my X32 over in the corner, and that is connected to the B port of my Behringer wing here. Now, as we can see, I have a little red light up here, and that's because there's some configuration on the Behringer X32 that we need to do to actually get this to work correctly. Now, in this setup, I am going to be choosing this Behringer wing to be the master control of our clock and sync. So to do that, we go to Setup, and then to Audio, and then right here where it says clock rate, we want to make sure that that is set to either 44.1 or 48. My recommendation is 48K. And then for sync source, we want to make sure that this is set to internal, because this wing is going to be the master sync source for all of the AES50 devices that are connected to it. Now that we have done that, I'm going to hop over to the X32 and get some things set up. Now, that AES50 cable is coming from my B port of my Wing Compact and going into the A port of the Behringer X32. So I'm going to hop over there and we can get some things set up. So I'm at my Behringer X32 now, and we can see that we have a red light on our AES50 port A. And that is because we are taking our sync locally instead of pulling it from our AES50A port. So what we need to do is we need to go to Setup, and then we need to change our clock source right here. And so what we want to do is we want to set our clock source to AES50A, because that's where my Behringer wing is connected. Now, with our sample rate, this needs to be the same setting as what it is on the Behringer wing. If I tried to set this to 44.1, we will notice that we now lose connectivity on our wing over here, and we're having a lot of issues. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this is set to 48 kilohertz, in which case everything will be happy. Now, because I'm wanting to use this Behringer X32 as the stage box, there's a few things that I need to change. First off, I want to go all the way over to my preamps tab, and I want to enable AES50 port A for HA remote. So I can take my 6th rotary knob, go all the way down here, and enable this. And this is going to give control to my preamps over to the Behringer wing. And so I'm going to go ahead and confirm. Now, the next thing I want to do is go to my routing tab, and on my AES50A, I want to change all of these 32 to be local 1 through 32. That way, those XLRs are available to my Behringer wing. So to do this, I'm going to just take this first rotary knob and rotate this all the way up until we get to local 1 through 8. And then we're going to do the same thing with our 9 through 16. And our 25 through 32. Now, one other thing that I want to mention here is we actually have 33 through 48 that goes from this X32 over to the wing. So we not only have our 32 inputs here that we can send, but we can also send an additional 16 inputs. So for instance, if you had a stage box connected to your AES50B, you could go ahead and route those channels to the wing on 33 through 48. But in my case, I wanted to make sure that I can set up the Talkback to work on this P16 output here. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to tab all the way over until we get to P16. So now that we're at our P16, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set this output on 1 to be my talkback mic. So I'm going to go down to talkback here, and then I'm going to go and scroll until we get to talkback. Now what this enables us to do is use the talkback of this Behringer X32, and it will send over our P16 output 1, which will then go to our Behringer wing, which will enable easy communication between our wing and our X32. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select channel 1 and press view in the configuration and preamp section. Now this little gain knob right here is going to be controlled by my wing. So if I go and try and adjust this, we'll notice that after a second, it will then go back to what it is set to on the Behringer wing. So let me go over to my wing and I will show you how this gets configured. Now that we're at my wing, I can go to routing. I can then go to my sources and then on source group, go and select AES50B. At this point, we can see that there is a Behringer X32 right here. We will also notice that there is gain adjustment that we have for our 32 inputs here. And then if we go to 33 through 48, we'll notice that we do not have any gain adjustment here. But what we can do is we can go and rename these if we want to. And I'm just going to put X32. And so we now have all of these inputs here labeled as X32. If we want to, we can go ahead and give it an icon and a color. There we go. Okay, so at this point, what I can do is go back to my settings and I can select just a single channel, which is my X32 input 1. And I now have my gain setting that I can send to the X32. And as we can see on the screen over there on the X32, I am adjusting that gain remotely from this Behringer wing, which is very, very great. Now then the other thing that we wanted to make sure of is that we have that talkback working from the X32 coming over to us at the wing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually enable that talkback real fast. All right, so I have my talkback working here, and you can see on B33, as I'm talking, we are hearing the talkback of the Behringer X32. So what I can do is I can rename this and I can put X32 and talkback. And let's give it an icon and color. So we'll give it red and a microphone icon. So at this point, I want to go ahead and route these to my channels. So let's go ahead and do that. So on my channels, I can go to my main and then unlock press +1 auto. And at this point, I can go select my source group as AES50B. And at this point, I can go ahead and route all of my channels accordingly to the way that I want to have them laid out. Now, of course, if we wanted to make any of these stereo, we definitely can. So I can go to my sources, I can go and find my X32, and I can create a stereo pair out of an odd plus even channel. So on my 31, 32, I can make that a stereo channel. Now, I could not do that to 30 and 31. It's always going to be a 29 and 30 can be stereo, or 31 and 32 can be stereo. So at this point, because this is stereo, on my Behringer wing, I can go and actually route this to a channel to be stereo on that channel. So for instance, on my channel 31, I can select my pair that I have here, and we can see that that is now a stereo channel, which is great. Now, the other thing I wanted to make sure of is routing that X32 talkback to make sure that it's landing in a channel here. And this is a perfect solution for using our auxes. This is a great spot to put it. So I will put my X32 talkback on A6. And there we go. So now if I go to my aux in, I can see that I have my X32 talkback right here working. Now, we want to make sure that our talkback that's right here is working to send over to that Behringer X32. Now, I have already set up my talkback, and we can go do that by going to audio and then going to talkback and either selecting channel 40 or aux 8, in which case I chose aux 8. And then on here, we want to go to our preamp and then assign the input of where we have this mic coming into. In my case, it's local 24. Now, at this point, I'm going to go to my routing, I'm going to go to my sources, and I'm going to pull up the source group of user signal. And then I like to use user signal 24 for being able to pull a post fader tap of my talkback to send out to my X32. Now, if I had this send of my Talkback input going to the X32 rather than going from a user signal, then it would be getting it pre-fader. It would be getting it pre-processing, pre-everything, because I'd just be sending the output of the input to the X32. So in this case, this is why I use a user signal, because I can tap this signal off of this channel at any point that I want to, in which case I'm going to choose post-fader. That way, when I mute or unmute my Talkback mic, it actually sends that way correctly. So in this case, I have selected user 24. I'm going to go and assign this to my Talkback. So in this case, we want to go and select aux channel, and then we want to select Talkback and make sure that is set to post. And at this point, I also want to label this. So this is going to be front of house Talkback. And so we can see that we have that there on user 24. Now, to output this to the Behringer X32, I'm going to go to my outputs, and I'm actually going to send it on channel 1. Now, the benefit of sending it down 1 is I can use the aux remap on the X32 to be able to just use 2 channels. That way I can get my Talkback set up on my X32. So in this case, I'm going to select my 1, I'm going to unlock and make sure that I'm routing my Talkback here to the X32. Now at this point, I'm going to press Talkback here, and I want to make sure that this is latching so I don't have to hold it. So now this is latching. Okay, and so if we go to our routing and look at this output, we can see that as my Talkback is uninserted, it is not actually going through to the output for the X32. But when I press my talk button again, it will start sending again. So I'm going to go over to the X32 now to configure some extra things. So on the X32, we're going to go to routing, and we're going to page all the way back over to input. And on our aux in, I'm actually going to select AES50A 1 and 2. Now at this point, if I go to my aux channel, and I select my aux 1, we will see that this says A1, which this is what is coming into this desk from the Behringer WING. So as I talk into this Talkback mic, check 1, 2, 3, 4, we can see that that is working and being sent to our X32. And then if I was to turn off my Talkback, we would notice that that goes away on that desk. Now, the only other thing that I want to mention is if you wanted your wing to control what the channels of the Behringer X32 are receiving, there's a few things that we need to set up. First, I'm actually going to now move this Talkback to being on 33. So first off, I'm going to unlock and set my Talkback to be on 33. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to send the channels that I want to this Behringer X32 over this output group. So for instance, if I had my first 8 channels, so channels 1 through 8 that I want on the X32, coming from my local inputs on my Behringer WING compact here, then what I would do is I would go and select this first output for my output group of AES50B. I would then select my source group and go to my local in. At this point, I can start patching. Now the first 8 channels of the Behringer X32 are receiving the inputs locally from my Behringer WING. Now at this point, then I could go and route the channels from that X32 back to itself. So in this case, I'm going to go to my source group and pull up AES50B. And in this case, we're just going to select 1 through 24 for being our 9 through 32. Make this a little complicated for us. There we go. So at this point, I can see that my local 1 through 8 is going to be going to my channels 1 through 8 on my X32. Then channels 9 through 32 are going to actually be inputs on that X32, 9 through 32. Now, because our Behringer WING has one-to-one patching, meaning that I can put whatever I want per output, then I can make this routing as complicated as I want to. So for instance, if I wanted to make sure that my channel 11 over there had my source from AES50A from my DL32, I can do that. Now, there's one other thing that we need to go do on the Behringer X32 to actually receive these channels from this wing. Now remember, I am still using the X32 as a stage box, using my wing to then send the channels that I want to back to the X32. And so Over here at the X32, we would go to routing, and then on our inputs, we are actually going to set these to AES50A 1 through 8, 9 through 16, 17 through 24, 25 through 32. And then the next thing that I want to do is go and change my aux-ins to be user 1, 2. At this point, I need to make sure that I route my user 1, 2 real fast. So we're going to page all the way over until we get to user. And then I'm going to make sure that our slot is on input. And on in1, I'm going to select AES50A. And then I'm going to scroll all the way down until we get to AES50A 33. Because remember, we are wanting our talkback from the Behringer WING to be on 33, and we want that to be on aux1. So now if I go and select my aux1, press view in the configuration and preamp section, we can see that this is coming from A33, which means it's coming from our Behringer WING. And so at this point, I can grab my microphone and I can press our talk button, check 1, 2, 3, 4, and as we can see, it's working on the Behringer X32. Now, we can set these up as complicated as we want to. So again, we can just use the X32 as the main source of inputs. And then just keep that X32 with the local ins. And then we can just set up our channels to pull from the local ins on that X32 through AES50B. Now, one great thing about having it this way is that your front of house engineer that's controlling things from this Behringer WING would be controlling the preamp gains. And as long as you guys set the preamp gains pretty consistently from service to service or weekend to weekend, then the mixes that you're creating on the X32 would be pretty dialed in, pretty close to the same thing every single time. And then all you would have to do is have a great engineer sitting at the Behringer WING controlling the preamp gains correctly for the X32. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on the X32 or the Wing, or really anything that's out there, please post that in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that are going to be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com, where I have a whole bunch of downloads, presets, etc., and a bunch of blog posts about all of these different pieces of gear. And so you can check those out at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.